Nigeria's first quarter trade figures and the latest subsidy updates. And joining me this morning is Kelvin Emmanuel. He's the CEO of Dairy Hills Limited. Very good morning to you, Kelvin. Great to have you on.
Good morning, Aya. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. For our listeners, you can be a part of the conversation this morning by sending your messages to us via WhatsApp on 0809 440 981. We're also streaming live on YouTube, yes, at Smooth 981 FM Lagos. So you can join the live stream as well. All right, let's get right into things, Kelvin. Now, let's start with foreign trade. We saw Nigeria's quarter one numbers drop to it's dropped 17% year on year to 12 trillion naira. What was the reason for this?
You know, if you look at the GDP numbers for the first quarter of 2023, you realize that GDP dropped from about 30.54% to somewhere around 2.2%, if I'm not mistaken, on the back of the impact of the shortage of cash and Naira redesign. You know, we talked about it extensively this year, the first quarter of this year, that the failed Naira redesign policy was going to have a negative impact on the economy. And you can see it. And you can also see that about 79% of the import volume was on PMS. You can see it took about 5.9 trillion or 5.8 trillion. And PMS remains a major source of exchange rate-linked demand inflation. Sure. And this is the reason why I actually believe that the MPC Monetary Policy Committee hiking rates to, try to tighten monetary policy, it's not effective to fight rising inflation. I expect that, when the inflation numbers are released, the regulation of PMS is going to impact on an increase in inflation. But you can see very clearly that the basket and what makes up the trade numbers, both imports and exports, and particularly for imports, more than 2/3 of that import goes to petrol. And you can see how energy plays a major role in determining inflation in Nigeria. For exports, there was a drop as compared to the Q4 of 2022. So I actually think that the government needs to focus more on the levers to try to see how Nigeria can export more of what it processes than what the raw materials it produces, in order to bring in more foreign exchange to balance the exchange rate markets in Nigeria.
All right. Now, Kelvin, speaking about imports and exports, crude oil dominated on both of those fronts. How is this possible?
Well, this is where we are. This is where we are. This is the reason why the Dangote refinery is going to help to process some of the crude oil that Nigeria exports into derivatives and actually strengthen the industrial supply chain for manufacturing in Nigeria. We need to, revamp the economy from this mono economy where we export crude oil, we get dollars, and we sell to the market through wholesale Dutch auction or secondary market intervention scheme, where Nigeria benchmark the economy on oil price and then struggle to meet up with OPEC quota. We need to revamp the economy away from that. We need to move away from that. Nigeria needs to do backward integration for areas where it has comparative advantage and export more semi-processed and processed goods. That's the way you can reflate the economy. It's very sad because you find a situation where either when Nigeria is not able to meet OPEC quota because of security problems in Niger Delta or downtime for platform producing oil, or crude oil price comes down, the economy is at a loss, and it's difficult for the government to fund its budgets, and it has to borrow more money, and it leads to debt and it leads to inflation. You have to move the economy away from that. You can't rely on that structure to be able to meet up the demand with the 2023 Nigerian economy. It's just not working.
Just not working. Now, Kelvin, looking at how crude oil is so dominant in our trade, is there any truth to people who keep saying that Nigeria's economy is diversified?
Well, I wouldn't say there is no truth to what they say. The reality of the matter is that we don't have how I'll put it, like we don't have an heavy industry manufacturing base, and that is a major problem. And the two major impediments to that are electricity and lack of steel. You will not believe that most of the steel that is used in Nigeria for construction is actually imported from other countries, from Russia, from India, and from other countries. Nigeria has a lot of pig iron in the southeast, in the north central. It beats my imagination that in 2023, Nigeria imports steel, and Nigeria is struggling to get an output of 6,000 megawatts of electricity. It beats my imagination. It beats my imagination, for example, that in 2023, NLC is threatening strike, even if they had a communique last night and they suspended it. And the National Nigerian Union of Electricity Employees are threatening to shut down the national grid and go on strike. I mean, how do you shut down the national grid and go on strike in 2023? So electricity is an important issue. Electricity still is an important issue for having a functioning heavy industries manufacturing base. So if you want to diversify the economy, you need to fix the fundamentals that are required to diversify the economy. The problem with production in Nigeria, industrial production especially, is lack of supply chain. So if you want to diversify the economy, you have to fix your supply chain. A lot of the manufacturing done here, which is consumer manufacturing, you will not believe that their production is actually tied to imports from other countries. It's actually tied to companies who do enterprise manufacturing, or what they call business to business in other countries, for them to be able to produce in Nigeria. So when your naira drops, your inflation goes up because it costs them more, and it's more difficult for them to source US dollar to be able to import the inputs they need to produce in Nigeria. This is a problem.
All right, now Kelvin, let's talk about about labor, because you did mention the NLC earlier on. Now, the strike plan for tomorrow has been temporarily halted by the courts, at least. Now, did they get their way on getting an increase in the minimum wage? I know that they demanded an upward increase up to 200,000 naira, and can the government even afford such an increase? Really?
Well, I wouldn't call the TUC, Trade Union Congress, I wouldn't call them unreasonable. That's a stretch, but I am an objective person, so I'll tell you categorically that 200,000 naira demand per month, even if Nigerians deserve it, it's just not going to fly. It's not going to work. However, it's also important that as they require a request for a minimum wage, they also ask the government to implement public sector reforms. It's very important as a tool to cut down the cost of governance. Right? Number one. Number two, it's also important that they ask the government to pass an employee casualization bill as a tool to ensure that in the private sector, for private sector employers, especially for unorganized private sector, not the organized private sector, the unorganized private sector that has the plumber, the mason, the laborers, the security guards, the house helps, that it becomes criminal for an employer to keep them for more than 6 months without confirming them as staffs with benefits. If you have a house help, it's become criminal in that casualization to pay them below the Minimum Wage Act of 2019. So if you increase the minimum wage to 60,000 or to 50,000, for example, you cannot pay house help because they are part of unorganized labor and they don't belong to any labor union less than the minimum wage. Now, this minimum wage actually favors government workers. It doesn't favor private sector workers that are not part of labor unions, or what I call unorganized labor. Okay. So these are areas the TUC and the Nigerian Labour Congress, NLC, they need to pay attention. These are technical areas and reforms that they need to pay attention for any increment in minimum wage to have an effect. on unorganized labor, which make up a huge chunk of the labor force in the real economy.
That is true. All right, Kelvin, we actually run out of time, but I'll take a message pretty quickly from WhatsApp here. This is from Matthew, and he says, Nigerian iron is a low-grade ore consisting of only 32% iron, making it not economically viable. So a business owner would prefer to recycle scrap or import ores. This has also been major consideration for private investors. All right, thank you, Matthew, for your message. And thank you as well, Kelvin, for joining me on Business Express this morning. Kelvin Emmanuel is the CEO of Dairy Hills Limited. I hope you have a great day and a great rest of the week as well.
Thank you, Ayo. I wish you same.
All right. All right, Smooth 98.1, your love music, love live station. So much to come, more great music for, and at 7:30, we'll get in.